Hello, and welcome to the Her Head in Films podcast. I'm your host. My name is Caitlin. In this podcast, I share my personal musings on cinema. If you never listened to the podcast before, you might be wondering who I am. As I said, my name is Caitlin. I created this podcast because I live in a rural area in the South in the United States. I live in a place where there's not really a big emphasis on culture or on books or films or anything like that. So I don't really have anyone to talk to about these things that I'm passionate about. So that's sort of the function of the podcast. And who I am, I'm a writer, I'm a dreamer. I love literature, I love art, I love film. I have a mad, furious passion for cinema and art house cinema and foreign cinema. I'm a cinephile, I'm a cinemaniac, I guess is a word that I like to use to describe myself, because I really do just adore films, and that is what I seek to share in this podcast. And so that's why I created the podcast. I wanted to have an outlet. I needed to I needed to share my feelings and my thoughts about these films that I experience. And so that's how this podcast was born. And if you're scratching your head about the title, it comes from an email that I wrote a friend a few years ago when I was really, really obsessed with films. I was like in the zone. I go through periods where I am just obsessed. And I'll watch, 2 or 3 films in a day if I'm able to. And I said in that email, my head isn't in the clouds, my head is in films. And so it became this sort of tagline, I guess, or this mantra or this motto or something. And so when I got to thinking about starting a podcast, I thought that is the perfect way to encapsulate the way I feel about cinema, which is that it is my head is in cinema. My brain is thinking about it. These images have imprinted themselves on my brain. And so I just loved that phrase that I just kind of came up with on a whim in an email, So that's the introductory bit, I'm not very good at that, but if you're new to the podcast, I welcome you. I hope that you find something worthwhile about it, or maybe in a few minutes you'll just pause it and stop it and never listen again. That's your prerogative. But if you stick around, or if you're a continuing listener and someone who continues to support me, I really appreciate that. And I've talked about it before, but I want to talk a bit more about this podcast. And I haven't done an episode in a little while. It's been a few weeks. Those of you who are regular listeners may have noticed. And so I really missed this. I was waiting on a microphone. So this is the first episode where I'm doing the podcast with a microphone. In the past, I had basically just been getting really close to my Chromebook and just sort of speaking into my computer. And so it's really nice to have a microphone. It's much more comfortable. And I decided that because I love doing these podcasts so much, I also have a book podcast where I talk about literature, and I'll put the link to that in the description of this episode. It's called Her Head in Books, so they're very much connected for me. I love books and I love films. So I was waiting on this microphone, and I finally got it today. So I'm really excited to bring you this episode with a microphone. I'm hoping that maybe the sound quality is a little bit better for you, and it's just really more comfortable for me. Like right now, I'm just sort of laying on my bed in the dark, talking. That's how I tend to do these podcasts. So I'm excited. Like, I just feel really excited that I have the microphone and I can come back and talk to you because I've really missed it. I've watched some really great films, and I've been wanting to talk about them and share that experience with you. So I'm going to get to that in a few minutes, but you know, some of you who have listened to the podcast before, you know that I kind of like to meander a little bit. And I like to go on tangents. And I like to just, before I get into the film, I like to just talk about something more general or more personal. So I've been thinking lately. I was having this really interesting chat on Twitter with someone who I adore. And we talk a lot. And she's really lovely and wonderful. And we were talking about how, like, we need art and how we can't live without art. And those of you who follow me on Twitter, that's my main base. And I will have my Twitter link in the description of this episode. I like to share, like, little fragments from my journal on Twitter. And, because that's what I write a lot. I just write these little fragments, these little bits and pieces of myself that I'm able to capture, you know. So I think in, like, one thing that I wrote on Twitter, I wrote, like, I can't live outside of art. It's just, it's not possible for me. It's like, when I'm out in the real world, when I'm going about my day, when I leave my apartment, I don't necessarily leave it a lot, because I'm sort of a recluse, and I struggle with anxiety and depression and those kinds of things. So I'm very much a homebody. I'm someone who I stay in a lot. But I think about this a lot, about how, like, I don't know how to live outside of art. And I know a lot of people say they can't live without art. Like, they can't live without books. They can't live without writing. I remember there's this interview with Clarice Lispector where she says, you know, when I'm not writing, I'm dead. I feel dead when I'm not writing. And I agree with that. And, you know, there are people who just can't live without things. But I'm talking about living outside of it. Because for me, a book is an experience. A book is this world that I enter. And it's the same thing with a film. I enter these places and I live inside them. And I don't know how to leave them. I don't want to leave them. And it reminds me of this thing I wrote years ago. I am obsessed with the film La Vie en Rose, which is about Edith Piaf. And it stars Marion Cotillard. And it is one of my favorite films. And it's a sublime film because of what Marion was able to do in her performance as Piaf. I felt when I watched that film that this was a performance for the ages. This was a performance in which the actress completely transformed into this person. I felt like Marion, like, inhabited Edith Piaf, or like resurrected her through her body and her face and her mannerisms. And I really, when I wrote my review, and I don't even know where I posted it. Like, this was before I even had a Tumblr, like, which was 2010. So I don't even know where this review exists. But what I wrote in it was that, for me, that film, yes, it was about Edith Piaf, but it was also about how does a performer live off the stage? Because when Piaf was on stage, she gave all of herself. She lived and breathed on that stage. She was alive on that stage. But then she has to leave the stage. She cannot live on the stage 24/7. She cannot live that art all the time. But it's the only time when she's alive. It's the only time when she's who she was meant to be, you know. And when she was off the stage, that's where the heartache and the pain and everything comes in that makes her even want to be on stage and inspires, you know, her songs and stuff. But it's like, how do we live in the spaces between art? How do we function when we don't have it? Like, because we have to have regular jobs, and we have to go to the grocery store, and we have to do all these mundane tasks, and we have to, like, deal with life, right? You know? But all I want to do is read. You know, all I want to do is watch a movie. Like, I have a hard time existing outside of that state, outside of that experience of art, you know? Like, I want to live on those pages. I want to live in that movie. I want to live in my words, you know, the words that I write. Like, this has always been something that I've struggled with as a writer, too. It's like, what I write is me. Like, that is the part of me that is real. That is, like, that is the essence of who I am, is the words that I write. Like, when you read those words, you're reading me. You're reading my essence and my soul. And that's who I am. I am these words, but I'm not. Like, I'm this body that ends. I'm this body that will break down and won't exist forever, you know? I'm temporary. And I have to live in this world of violence, of poverty, of, you know, all these things that affect me on a daily basis. And it's like, I don't know how to do it sometimes. Like, I just want to exist in the art. I want to exist inside these words or these images on a screen, you know? And I wanted to talk about that in this podcast because I still don't know how to say it. I still don't know how to comprehend it, and I don't know how to make other people comprehend it, you know. I wonder if it goes back to that Walt Whitman, you know, saying of, you know, I contain multitudes, you know, and it's like, you feel that way sometimes. You feel like there's so much of yourself that is incomprehensible to other people, that there is so much of you. There's so much. You can't express all of it. You feel so much. You have so many dreams. I mean, I'm talking about myself. I feel so much. I dream. I ache. I struggle. And it's like, when I'm watching a movie or I'm reading a book, it's like, that's when I'm most alive and most real and most at peace and most engaged. But what I struggle with is when that movie ends or that book ends, or when I have to be in the real world and I have to be this person and I have to, like, be something that I'm not. I have to pretend. I have to put on this show, you know, like, yeah, you know, whatever. And it's like, all I want is art. Like, that's all I want, you know. I want that feeling that I get with art, that wholeness, that beauty, that intensity, you know, that fire, I guess you could call it. Like, and I can't live outside of it. It's like, who I am outside of it isn't really me, and it isn't really real. It's like, I'm my true self when I'm alone, when I'm engaged with this book or engaged with this film. Like, that's the real me, and I can't translate that for anybody. I can't make anybody understand who I really am. And so I do this podcast, I think, because maybe I can attempt to convey some of that to someone, and I can, you know, free this voice inside myself, you know, and maybe that voice can reach other people. And so this podcast, in a way, has become like life-saving or like life-sustaining, like this way to express a part of me that is inexpressible, that is unsayable, you know? The person that I am when I'm watching a movie or reading a book, it's like, that's what I want to convey in this podcast. Like who I am and what I feel and what I think, and I want to transmit it to someone. I want someone else to feel it, maybe they'll find something in it, or they'll connect to it, or something like that, you know, like maybe that's all I can do. I don't know. I feel so small and so invisible and so marginal and so, you know, I'm just nobody, you know. But I have so much in me, and I just struggle to express it. I struggle to share it, you know. But I want to share it. So that's all I wanted to say for now about that. Now we're going to go on to the film that I want to talk about, and that connects to it in a way. Deep breath. I feel like I'm just trying to articulate things that are just ether. Like I don't even know what I'm saying sometimes. Okay. So the film that I desperately want to talk about today is a classic. It's a big classic by a master director. It's called The Big City. It's an Indian film by Satyajit Ray. And I like to preface this with, I have researched as much as I can the pronunciation of names, but I do have an accent, and I can only do so much. And so some people said Ray, some said Rye. I'm going to go with Ray. It's just easier. And so I do apologize if I'm butchering these names. I didn't mean to. I tried to research, but I'm doing my best, okay? And so it's The Big City. It stars Madhabi Mukherjee, who was also in Ray's film Charulata. Oh gosh. Charulata. Oh god, my mind just went blank. Charulata. Which I really loved. I watched that a few years ago. And it also had Madhabi Mukherjee in it. So she is this glorious, radiant, sublime actress in the film. And so The Big City, I watched it a few weeks ago, actually. I didn't have my microphone, so I had to wait to talk about it. And it was a film, I'm struggling to even talk about it. The images have stayed with me. I watched it, I guess, like 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago. And it stayed with me, these images. I find myself still thinking about it. And I have my notes. So, let me look at these notes. Alright. So I've been thinking a lot about this film, and I was thinking today about how what I love about world cinema, about art house cinema too, is like I said before, I am nobody. I am living in nowhere, USA. Like really. Live in the middle of nowhere. I am so far away from India. I've never been to India. I've never been out of the United States. takes money to travel, and I don't have it. Plus, I have a lot of anxiety about it. So India to me is a very far away place. I don't have really any connection to it. I wouldn't say I'm highly knowledgeable about India. I do have a few friends on the internet, Twitter especially. I have people that I have met who live in India, who are from India, and they're lovely, and they're wonderful people. But I don't know that much about the country. I certainly would like to learn more, and I should learn more. So, when I watch an Indian film, it doesn't necessarily... How do I say this? I don't know. It's like, it's this other world. Just like I'm sure somebody in India, if they watched a film about the South, here in the South, they would think that's like such a different world from them. So it's like, it's this country, it's so far away. I don't have really any personal connection to it. I don't know a ton about it, Of course, I want to learn more. But it's just amazing that this place that's so far away, and yet I watch films set in India, and I love them. Like, they're very specific. Like, The Big City, it's a very specific film about a specific experience in India. It was made in 1963. It's set in Calcutta. It's about an Indian housewife, or I think they're Bengali. And it's about her getting a job. The family is struggling to make ends meet, and so she becomes a sales girl. She goes house to house. Madhabi Mukherjee's character. She goes house to house selling this knitting machine to Indian housewives, very rich Indian housewives, who have very large homes, and they're living, in the lap of luxury, really. And so it's about that. It's about how her getting that job affects her family. It's about how she handles certain things that arise in the workplace. It's about how her relationship with her family changes, how she herself changes. So it's this very specific story set in Calcutta. And yet, decades later, I watch this film in Nowhere, USA, and I'm so moved by it, and I fall in love with it, and I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks now. And so that's what I love about world cinema, is that what it does really, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, but it breaks down walls and barriers. It takes you into another life, into another world that is different from your own. It's okay that we're different. It's okay. Like, I don't know why we're so scared of difference. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's something that is happening now with the rise of right-wing extremism around the world, especially in Europe and here in the U.S. There is this fear of difference. There is this fear of the other. And so we want to dehumanize people who are from other countries or who are of other religions. And I think world cinema is even more important now. Like, it's so important to open yourself up to different cultures and to different people. So I just think it's amazing. This is what I love about world cinema. Like, I'm just, I'm so far away from India, and yet I feel so close through this film. I feel like I get this little glimpse into the human condition in India at a specific time. but also something that gives us an idea of the human condition throughout time and the human condition in the world that we live in now. So, let's talk some more about this film and why I love it so much. And, first of all, it centers a woman's subjectivity. Now, I was lucky enough to watch this film on a really great website. It's called Filmstruck. It would be available to those who live in the United States. And I just want to be upfront that when I recommend films or books, when I mention websites or products or anything, I am not paid to do that. I am not told to do that. I have no connection with these things. These are just personal things that I use and that I enjoy. And so I just want to make that clear, because some people may wonder, oh, was she saying that? Is she promoting a website because they sponsor her or they tell her to, or I don't know. You never know with people. So anything that I mention, or like a website or anything like that, it's just I personally use it and I think that you might like it. It's that simple. Like, I'm not being enriched or anything like that. So I finally got a Filmstruck subscription, and this was a big deal to me, because Filmstruck is a partnership between Turner Classic Movies, which here in the United States, Turner Classic Movies, for those of you who don't know, it's a television channel, and 24/7 there's no commercials, and they just show films. They show classic films. They sometimes show world cinema, but usually they show classic films. And so a lot of people who are passionate about film love this channel. I myself do. It was really, really important to me when I was discovering films and cinema. So it's a partnership between Turner Classic Movies and the Criterion Collection, which the Criterion Collection is a distribution company for international and world cinema and classic cinema. And so I finally got a subscription, and it has everything. It's an art house cinema lover's dream. Like, you've got Ingmar Bergman, you've got Kieślowski, you've got it all. You've got Jean Renoir, you've got Francois Truffaut, you've got Jean-Luc Godard, you've got Chantal Akerman, you've got Agnes Varda, you've got Ozu, and you've got Tarkovsky. It's everyone, okay? I was so happy when I got it. I was finally able to have this. And so that's how I was able to see The Big City. And because it's through Filmstruck, they also offer extras. So there was like an interview with Madhabi Mukherjee, and there was a documentary, like a film scholar talking about Ray's films, and he positioned them within the context of Indian history and Indian society. And so I got to watch these extra documentaries, which were really enlightening and really fascinating. And so I hope to do that with some more of Ray's films that are on the website. So I will talk a little bit about those little documentaries as well. So what's important about this film, first of all, is that it really centers a woman's subjectivity. And so the documentary that I saw with this Indian film scholar, where he talked about Ray's films, is that he talks a lot about how Ray was thinking of, India had gotten its independence, and there was probably, I guess, this sense of this is this new society, and what will it be? And Ray strongly believed in the place of women, that they had a role to play in the new India, and in India's future, and in its birth. And so he did Charulata, which is a really beautiful film. It also centers a woman's subjectivity. And then he does, The Big City. This film focuses on Madhabi. It's about her experience of going into the workplace and her struggles and her triumphs and the complexities of the situation, because they are struggling financially. And her father-in-law is very much against her going into the workplace. He's very traditional, he's very conservative, I guess you could say, and he doesn't believe that women should go into the workplace. And so he sort of refuses to talk to her. And so there's this, when she goes to work, it changes the family dynamic. And so she has to deal with that, and then she also has to deal with, there's the family unit at home, but then when she starts this job, there's a sort of family unit at her workplace, because she's not the only saleswoman. There's a whole group of her and several other women who are going from house to house and selling these knitting machines. And so, in a way, these women become a second family. And I really loved how the film focused on women, on Indian women, on their experience in society. And there is this sense, and what I also really loved, now that I'm thinking about it, I loved how the women worked together. Because there can be this stereotype about women that they get catty or they backstab or something like that, which I don't find to be true, obviously. And it's a really vicious stereotype about women. I mean, it just is. But this film shows women standing up for each other. And there is this one girl in the group called Edith. And she's an Anglo-Indian. So she speaks English throughout the film. And she goes in to talk to the boss to get them a raise and to make sure that they get commission. And she's very modern. She wears more like Western clothing, whereas Madhabi's character wears like a sari and wears maybe more traditional clothes. I don't know for sure. I don't want to make assumptions. But Edith wears, more Western clothing. So she's maybe seen as this, maybe the new woman or something like that, or more modern or something like that. But it's not that she thinks she's better than anyone. It's not like that. It's all these women working together, standing up for each other, supporting one another. They're of different ages. They seem to be from different backgrounds. But in the workplace, they really come together and they stand up for one another. And it's sort of this portrait of sisterhood as well. So I think that's an interesting aspect of the film that I didn't even actually think about until I was talking just now about the relationship between the women. I think that's a really important part. Madhabi's character, her relationship with Edith is really important. There's this really great scene where Edith gives her lipstick. She puts lipstick on Madhabi's lips, and it sort of maybe represents this moment when, Madhabi is sort of, I guess, becoming a different person, or she's changing or transforming, and that's an interesting aspect of the film, is how Madhabi's character is changed, by working. How she feels very proud when she's able to bring the money home. She's able to buy gifts for her children, and she's able to contribute in some way, and that seems to mean a lot to her. There's this really great scene where she gets her first paycheck, and she goes into the bathroom to be alone, and she stands in front of this mirror, and she's looking at herself in the mirror, and she's holding the money that she's made, and she's looking at herself, and you really I mean, Ray is just so brilliant. The way he conveys this, it's this sense of her changing and her becoming this new person, this new woman, and she's really proud, I think, and she feels confident in herself, and she feels I guess she feels like she's really I don't know what the word is, but she's coming into her own in a way, you know? And he really conveys that beautifully. Like, at first she's scared, like she, on the first day when she is going door to door to sell this knitting machine, the first house she goes to, somebody comes to the door, I guess a servant, and she runs away. She's very scared. She's very nervous. And there's these very interesting shots that Ray does. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's because there's gates for all these homes, because they're like mansions, really. And Ray shows Maudeby behind the gate, like the gate in front of her, and you see her face in between the slats of the gate, and it almost looks like she's behind bars or in prison or something when she's first starting out. There's this sense of fear and uncertainty about doing this. You know, she's not sure if she can or if she has the confidence to do it. And then she starts, she does go to a house, and she does go in, and she does speak to the wife of the house, and it goes very well. And so she starts to do really well, and she gets very good at it, to the point where the boss wants to really promote her and have her manage the other girls and stuff. So she really gains confidence in herself, it seems like. What's interesting is that I think you could argue that the film is sort of about maybe the modernity and tradition, sort of the clash between those two things. And, you know, with her father-in-law, he doesn't really agree with her going into the workplace, but he eventually comes around. And what's really great about this film is that I didn't feel like it demonized any of the characters. Like, it didn't make her father-in-law out to be this, like, oh, this terrible misogynist, sexist guy or something. You know, he comes from a different generation that had maybe a different conception of women and what women were supposed to do. But it doesn't demonize him, you know, and it shows how, you know, a woman working, especially at that time in 1963, in Calcutta, you know, in India, how it did affect the family. You know, she has a son, and the son has to get used to, I think earlier I said children, didn't I? No, she only had one child. She had a son. And so she has to spend time away from him. The son gets very sullen, and he gets very, you know, upset about not being able to be with his mother all the time anymore. But I felt that Ray handled that really wonderfully. It's, you know, the dynamic does change, and she has to adapt to that, and she can't be with her son all the time, and it hurts her. You know, she misses her son, and she misses that he's distant from her, and she buys him things, almost like maybe trying to buy his love a little bit, you know, buying him lots of gifts and things like that, to try to make up for the fact that she has to work and she can't be there. And later in the film, her husband, he works at this bank, and the bank goes under, and he loses his job, and so she has to stay at that job, and she has to really work hard and bring in, you know, money for the whole household. And that's a lot of pressure for that to be on her shoulders, but she handles it. She's very strong in that way. I think Madhabi is such a wonderful actress, and she conveys such complexity and such a range of emotion and feelings. I really love her. I really loved her in this film too. I love the way Ray used shadows in this film. I mean, above all, this film is just so aesthetically gorgeous. I had seen Charulata and I loved it, but it just didn't hit me at the time what an artist Ray is. I just think he's a really masterful director, and I don't know if he really gets the attention he deserves. I mean, everybody knows Truffaut or Tarkovsky or Rossellini or Godard, or you know what I mean? Those are sort of household names. I don't know if Ray is a household name. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. But, I've been watching art house cinema since 2011, I would say. So I've been at this for about 6 years. And, he doesn't come up as much as he should, and this film really has inspired me to watch more of his work. I feel like this is a master. This is someone who is creating films that are very profound and are very artistic and are very important. This is an important director. Madhabi, in the interview that I was able to see of her when she's talking about making The Big City, she talks about how when she saw her first Ray film, that was the first time she realized that cinema could be art. That it's not just something that you do for entertainment. It is something that can be art. And I definitely agree. This film, there's these wonderful shadows and the way he uses light, and like I talked about, the gates and the bars and mirrors, when Madhabi's looking at herself in the mirror after she gets her first paycheck. It's the way these scenes are shot and the way they're set up it's just masterful, I think. And so I definitely want to watch more of his films. Definitely. And Filmstruck has quite a few, and so I'm definitely going to delve into his body of work for sure. At the end of the film, the boss fires Edith, and this is a very big moment for Madhabi's character, and I feel like this was a very powerful moment because she is the sole breadwinner for her family at this point. Edith gets fired. Edith has been out sick for several days, and the boss doesn't believe that Edith was sick, and he thinks Edith was just, I guess, out partying or something like that. And so he fires her. And Madhabi, in this really amazing moment of friendship and sisterhood, I think, she decides that she's going to stand up for Edith, and she does. And it's this very moral moment. It's this moment of morality, right? And she basically quits. She basically says, you should not have treated Edith that way. And she leaves. And it's this very powerful moment, but at the same time you're thinking as you watch, and maybe this is just, from going through a recession, in 2008 like we did, I'm like, oh my God, what is she gonna do? She's she's the sole breadwinner. Like, what's gonna happen to her now? I was worried for her. But I think it's asking this very moral question that, for me, I don't feel like modern films really talk about morality. And I'm not talking about religion, but about right and wrong, about standing up for people or standing up for what you believe in against the odds, about justice, films about morality and justice. I mean, if you think about, like, the Decalogue by Kieślowski, that is a moral series. You don't have to be a Christian to appreciate it, but it is looking at moral situations, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's the death penalty, whether it's love. It's asking moral questions. And I just feel like a lot of modern films don't do that. They're not interested in morality or interested in, what it means to be human or the choices that we have to make sometimes. But this film, in the end, felt very moral to me. And maybe it's a commentary on capitalism as well. Like, how many people would have stood up to their boss, at the cost of their own livelihood, because she loses her job. But in that moment, it's important to Madhavi's character to stand up for Edith who fought for them, Edith who was a friend, Edith who was a good person and was nice and decent. But it made me think a lot about capitalism now and the workplace and jobs, and how there is such a lack of worker solidarity. When you think about here in the United States, unions are at sort of an all-time low. People are not in unions. People are divided. Corporations are able to divide the workers against one another instead of workers having solidarity or standing up for each other. And how many of us have been put in really difficult situations at workplaces, and how we didn't feel like we were treated right, or we weren't treated justly, especially women and women of color in the workplace, the way they are often treated. And this film is about that. It's about how, women are treated in the workplace, and they really had to fight to get what they deserved, to get commission and to get that raise and all that. So for Madhavi's character to stand up to this man and to say, you're not going to treat another woman this way, I will not allow it, what a moment of integrity, right? What a moment of dignity. And she knew what she was putting on the line when she did that. And maybe you think it's foolish, maybe you think it's idealistic, but it was also very satisfying to watch her stand up like that, and to be heard, and to speak out, and to say, no, I'm not gonna let you do this, or I'm not gonna let you get away with this. And I mean, that is, for me, like one of the cornerstones of the film, is that climax. And I guess that's why I'm still thinking about it. I don't know, but I just feel like it's really saying something about standing up for people, standing up for one another. And I mean, you think about how the conditions in workplaces have deteriorated, and I don't know if somebody would do that now, but she just believed in doing that, And, some people may think the ending is a bit idealistic, because at the end, and I guess this is maybe where the title comes from, is her and her husband, she has to tell her husband that she quit her job, that, she's now unemployed. So now they're both unemployed. They have a child. The husband has a sister that lives with them, and then they have the husband's parents that live with them. So you're talking about a really big family that's dependent on her income. And she's got to tell her husband, well, I don't have a job anymore. But he takes it well, and they look up, and they're outside, and you see all these buildings and these tall buildings, and she says something like, this big city, this huge city, there's plenty of jobs, we'll find something. There is a great sense of hope at the end of this film, actually, that they will find jobs and they will be okay. Because as I said earlier, I was like so worried about her. I was like, oh my God, she's not going to have a job, but they have a sense of hope. And I guess maybe that comes from living in a city or living in Calcutta in that particular time. Maybe there was a sense of hope in the country and in India. Some may think it's idealistic or maybe too hopeful. But it's a very hopeful ending, Maybe a little too hopeful, But that's sort of, a different opinion, I think. I mean, everyone has their... there was a part of me that liked that hopeful ending, and then a part of me that felt like, well, that might be a bit idealistic, What if they're not able to find jobs? It's tough. It's tough. But you do get the sense that they will be okay, that they'll find a way. They will find a way, I'm just looking at my list of things I wanted to talk about. I think I've pretty much touched on everything. In the end, this is really a film about ordinary people and ordinary financial and economic struggles. Here in the United States, and I'm sure this is around the world in a lot of places, films especially and TV series tend to focus on the rich, or they tend to focus on the middle class. And there's not a lot of shows or movies that focus on people, just everyday, ordinary people who are struggling to get by, which is a lot of people nowadays. A lot of people struggle to get by, whether it's here in the United States or India or anywhere around the world. There's that class struggle, that's really constant for some of us. And I say this as someone who grew up poor and working class. And so I love a film like The Big City because I like films about ordinary people, about ordinary struggles. And I don't want to say this film is universal because I don't want to diminish the film or erase its very specific context of being in Calcutta in the 1960s and for one particular family in India. There was this really great essay that I came across recently, and it was about Moonlight, Barry Jenkins's film Moonlight. And it was for Clio Journal, which is a really great film journal. And I'll put the link in the description of this episode, but she was really writing about how when people talk about Moonlight, which is a very specific film about a black gay teenager in Florida, poor as well, and it's one of my favorite films of last year, and I did do a podcast on it, which I'll also put in the description. But she writes about how a lot of critics and reviewers and even fans of the film sort of say things like, oh, well, it's not just about, Chiron, who's the main character of the film. It's universal, And you saw this recently with a press conference about The Handmaid's Tale, which is being adapted for Hulu and is about to premiere. A lot of the actors and the actresses in the TV show, they didn't want to say that it's a feminist show. they said, oh, it's not feminist, it's a human story. So it's like everybody wants to say, oh, it's human, and that's what they say about Moonlight. Oh, it's not just about this black, gay, poor teenage child in the South. It's a universal story. Well, maybe there are things about it that you can relate to, but you shouldn't necessarily watch something because you can relate to it. You know what I mean? Like I said before, it's okay that there's difference in the world. You know, I watched The Big City knowing that it was a film about Indian characters, about people in India, people who are different from me, who have a different culture, who have a different experience. And that's one of the reasons why I watched it, because I wanted to get a look at somebody's story who's different from me. And maybe in the process, I'll discover something, or it'll expand my empathy or expand my view of the world. So it's good that things resonate with you about a film. Just like when I watched Moonlight, so much of that resonated with me. And there are things in The Big City that resonated with me, like class struggle, like, trying to stay afloat, trying to, deal with the workplace, deal with your family, all these really fascinating things in this film, and it's really wonderful. But I would never want to erase the very specific context of the film. And it's the same with Moonlight. We shouldn't always seek out things that connect to our own experience. Sometimes you need to confront difference. You need to confront things that are different from you, and to see the humanity in that, and to see that, they're people just like you are. They may be different, but listen to their story, and it's okay if something's not universal. What does that even mean? For so long, what was deemed universal was like the white male experience. A lot of literature about white men, a lot of films by and about white men. They're the default. They're seen as the universal. And so anything that's different from that has to be made universal too or something. It's weird, But there are things about the Big City that definitely resonated with me and I could relate to, but it's still this very specific story, and that's okay. It's okay that it's about a very specific world at a very specific time, just like Moonlight is. But those things are worth seeking out. It's definitely worth seeking out experiences that are different from your own and stories that are different from your own. Because when you do that, you really get a larger sense of the world. And the world is so vast. I don't know if I've said this before, but it is so vast. It's so diverse. It's crazy. It's like you can't even comprehend it. All the different cultures, all the different languages, all the different experiences and stories and myths and legends. And I mean, my God, there's billions of us, right? Billions and billions of us. And we're all just doing the best we can, and we all have different perspectives, and that's okay. It's just the diversity of the world. And watching world cinema, watching film. I mean, I watch films from around the world, y'all. I watch films about, Kazakhstan. I watched a film about Kazakhstan recently. I watched a film about Singapore. I watch films all the time about different parts of the world because I just want to get like a little glimpse into these places and into different people and hear their stories and hear their experience. And I mean, you'll never be able to comprehend the vastness and the diversity of this world, But I really wish we could embrace it more. I really wish we could not be afraid of it, like not be overrun by fear of difference. I really wish that for us, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I really loved The Big City. It's this story about ordinary people, but it's a very expansive story. It's about Calcutta. It's about India. It's about a woman, sort of changing and transforming, discovering a part of herself. I mean, I don't necessarily think work is that liberating. Work can be very demeaning. Work, certain kinds of work can be really difficult on the body, difficult on the soul. You think about people who, dig ditches, or people who, have to do really difficult jobs, like picking fruit, or there are back-breaking jobs, back-breaking work. And it's not always liberating for everybody. If you're stocking shelves at Dollar General, or Walmart, I wouldn't say that's the most liberating experience of your life, But in this particular story, for the woman, it was sort of an awakening for her in a way. And she was proud that she could provide for her family. And so it's about that. It's about women standing up for each other, right? It's about a family changing and trying to deal with a changing world. The world around us affects us personally. And so, the economics of India and what was happening in Calcutta directly affected the lives of this family, and so you see how economic conditions, cultural conditions, how they affect people, ordinary people on the everyday level. And so you see them trying to navigate this changing nation, this changing society that they live in, and the position of women and how that's changing and how they're having to adapt to that. You see a really great relationship between a husband and wife. I mean, it has its moments where there's fear. He's fearful that she's changing. He's scared that she's changing, But there's support there too, and there's love. And so, like I said, it centers a woman's experience, a woman's subjectivity, which is pretty rare, especially for films from the 60s and by a male director. Yeah. It's a beautiful film to watch. It's in this gorgeous, crisp, clear black and white, and masterfully shot, and beautiful scenes, and great symbolism and imagery. And I think Ray was a true master, and like I said, I look forward to watching more of his films, and I'll probably do podcasts about them, if I'm able to, and just share my ongoing love with, Satyajit Ray, and with his perspective and what he's trying to say and what he's trying to share about India, about the country that I'm sure he loved and that he grew up in, and the stories that he wanted to tell about his nation. And so I feel like this is a very singular cinematic voice that I had not given enough attention to. And so now that I've seen The Big City, I want to delve more deeply into his vision in the worlds that he created and the stories that he wanted to tell about, the people of India. And so I look forward to that. And I love this feeling of sort of discovering a new director, just this feeling of connection with somebody's work. It doesn't happen often, it's sort of a rare thing. So I feel like I've gone on enough. I hope I did this film justice. such a great film. And, if you have Filmstruck, or if you have access, to the film, I would definitely recommend that you watch it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's just a really, really beautiful, complex, fascinating film. So I will stop there. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And until next time, keep watching films, keep enjoying them, and I'll try to make some more episodes for you. But thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Bye.